So that's a big question on me. Second, Badiou and Derrida can both be placed within an especially French philosophical tradition of attempting to take full stock of contingency. And in fact, so can Sartre and Althusser. And I find this fascinating. It's a question that comes to bear in social theory when it comes to necessitarian or inevitabilist schemes of Marxist inspiration or otherwise. And this preoccupation unites, as I said, Sartre, Althusser, Derrida, Badiou. But it might especially be useful to take up Althusser's notion from his later work of what he called aleatory materialism, because Althusser in that work addresses Derrida's work directly. Seventh, looking further into the critique of Derrida from Zizek and Badiou, but also from some of the partisans of Gilles Deleuze, we can go further into the questions of community and friendship, noting that both Derrida and Badiou are critical of the idea of community, and certainly of communitarianism, and also into the Kantian cast of Derrida's thought, which is criticized by Badiou and Deleuze from the perspective of a return to Spinoza. Under these last two headings, I think while the criticisms of Derrida by Zizek and Badiou generate their own productive possibilities, I still think Derrida has more to give us, and deconstruction is not eclipsed and it's not spent. And then eighth and finally, I think there's still a lot, and I think this was spoken to, especially in Jim's paper, to learn from Derrida on the question of the future and futurity, and on the prophetic voice. And I mean, there is something interesting here, because I think one of the things I did very well was to link the prophetic voice to dialectical negativity. And I do think there is a critique, and frankly, I hear it at home quite often, because my dear life partner, Kathleen Lee, just finished a dissertation on Adorno and utopianism, where she has a whole chapter called Derrida without, or Adorno without negativity equals Derrida, basically. And so, you know, I hear it, when we go to bed at night, and I hear it in the morning when we get up at 7. Derrida just doesn't have the negativity. And I think it's right. If you don't have the negativity, then what is the prophetic voice? So can Derrida take us all the way to where you'd want to get with that? And me too, actually. I don't know. I think he can take us, some of them help us fill out the picture on this question of futurity, on the question of the idea of a promise, on the analysis of the future and anterior. And I was thinking about that graduate school at the University of Kansas, where Bob Antonio was one of my professors and was on my dissertation committee, and extremely helpful and general and a wonderful person. So this is a basketball story about the future anterior. But I was really, I know some people thought it was sentimental and sappy, and maybe you had to be a KU person to think it wasn't that, but after the Jayhawks won the NCAA basketball tournament a year and a half ago, the coach, Bill Self, was asked, well, what did you say to the players before the game? And he said, you are going to think about this victory every day for the rest of your lives, and I want for how wonderful this is going to be. I thought that was just genius. I mean, that was a brilliant use of the future anterior. Now, you probably know that this game came down to a buzzer-beating shot at the end that tied the game against Memphis, and then KU went on to win in overtime. And I'm a professor at a school that has some basketball reputation, although it goes up and down, and it's pretty far down right now. But I had a basketball player in my class last fall, and he, like many people, said, oh, Memphis should have won that game. And this itself is an excellent lesson in dialectics, actually. I say to them, yes, Memphis should have won the game. Guess what? They didn't win the game, therefore they lost the game, therefore the other team won the game. It's not enough that you should have won the game. You have to win the game, So that's a rich source of lessons, actually. But yeah, Bill Self, I thought the coach captured brilliantly for the future and here. Okay, I realize, I'm just giving you a list of things, and I don't quite know how much time we have left, but I'll... Okay, well, so then I want to just work a couple of these themes a little bit further. So in order to set the context of deconstruction's persistence, I think some ideas from Frederick Jameson are helpful. In Jameson's argument, it's capitalism itself that is, and it's the work of what he calls postmodernism theory, and he recognizes kind of infelicious expression, to help us with understanding the very element of this capitalism. Among the lots of aspects of history, a sense in which we become alienated even from our own alienation, a loss of meaning, a loss of the sense of where and when we are, what Jameson calls the cognitive mapping problem. And most to the point, the lost sense that the world could be a lot better than it is. Therefore, the loss of utopia. More than these losses, we might say, which are already well marked in the work of figures such as Sartre and Marcuse, and for that matter, Simone Weil and Georg Simmel, Jameson argues that these losses and absences have become normative, and even beyond, normalized and regularized, such that there is a loss of loss. In other words, a culture where few know what they are missing, few know what anyone is even talking about if they say, as Adorno and Ernst Bloch did in their discussion of utopia, something's missing. Oscar Wilde put it this way: a map of the world that does not include utopia is not even worth glancing at. Beautiful expression. In Jameson's scheme, the way to normalize cynicism with regard to utopia, or the way toward that, is that capitalism has to undermine all maps and all mapping. And of course, it would not be out of line to see this sometimes bland dystopia, and sometimes, massively grotesque dystopia, as we were shown yesterday, as simply the pervasive sense that there is nothing beyond instrumental reason, nothing beyond administered society and affirmative culture, as Adorno and Marcuse put it. Even the political economy of corporate finance capital that underlies this socio-cultural form has played out a little differently than some earlier critics of instrumental reason might have anticipated. The philosophical categories and ideas for dismantling the core of instrumental reason have really been with us for a long time, from Plato and Aristotle down to Kant, or from Moses and the prophets for that matter. And it could be said that the very core of capitalism, the commodification of labor power, is meaning-destroying and anti-human. But there is a more recent social machinery. And what I mean by that, Aristotle already said, look, you have to have a fundamental distinction in politics between the maintaining of a household, and I'm sure you all know that Greek word for household is the basis of our word economy, and what he called the mere getting of money. That's like 90% of Marx right there. I mean, yeah, you need a bit more, but that's a big chunk right there. But there's a more recent social machinery that takes instrumental reason and the commodification of everything to new levels. And one might even say that the aim of these new initiatives, or the underlying telos, but I don't mean in some conscious conspiratorial way, these new initiatives of capitalism is irreversibility. And I mean that also on an ideological level. I think this is where Jameson really excels. In other words, irreversibility in the sense of don't even think for a moment that anything could be any different than it is. You're a fool, you're a terrorist, you're a totalitarian. Jameson is great at exposing all of the dimensions of all of this. But there are crucial contributions here from Derrida as well. And I don't mean to sound snarky by saying that there are some ideas here that in Derrida that can take us deeper than Jameson takes us. And I frankly think we need sort of both dimensions. We need the breadth of Jameson, but we need the depth on certain of these categories that I think you get more from Derrida. Now, to get a good social theory from Derrida, we have to assemble, we have